Kamikaze Chris was known as a fearless driver and a force to be reckoned with on the streets. He seemed determined to win at all costs. But street racing isn't just about speed, it's a high-stakes game where even the best can't escape fate forever. Just when it looked like Chris had cemented his legacy, tragedy struck, turning his life upside down in an instant. What really happened and where does he go from here? This is the heartbreaking story of Kamikaze Chris and the tragedy that changed everything. Chris, the man behind Street Outlaws, the scary black El Camino on the show, isn't usually associated with a guy who dominates street racing, but he keeps surprising everyone. The funny thing is, it wasn't part of a big plan. Life just led him here, and he ran with it. For Chris, being the underdog is all he knows. He grew up in a working-class family in a tough part of Oklahoma City, and his family wasn't just struggling, they were absolutely struggling. They were completely broke. Not just short on cash, but so broke that hand-me-down clothes weren't just used, they were worn, stained, and well past their prime. If he wanted anything more than the basics, it was up to him to figure it out. For Chris, there was only one thing worth chasing, at least that's what he did at first. He started with dirt bikes, and if you ask him why, he'll say that he's not really a car guy but a racing guy. If it has wheels, he'll race it. By the time he was 3, he was already riding a dirt bike, a shopping cart, and maybe even a lawnmower if you put one in front of him. He never looked back. While other kids his age were playing in the park, he was working odd jobs to keep his bike running. Twice a week, he lined up at the starting gate to race against riders almost twice his age. But that didn't bother him. He was hungry to win, loved speed, and had a work ethic that set him apart. He got that work ethic from his father. Chris's dad was a successful drag boat racer who had one simple rule: if you break it, you fix it. Chris took that to heart, and mowed lawns, cut down trees, pumped gas, and did anything else to save money for his next ride. From a BMX bike to his first dirt bike, every upgrade was earned, and once he tried real competition, there was no stopping him. Around that time, he wasn't just racing, he was also helping other people get faster, especially when it came to their cars. Both Kamikaze and Big Chief were fierce competitors who lived and breathed cars, and never backed down from a challenge. In fact, Kamikaze was the one who first gave Big Chief his now comically nickname. But their bond wasn't just based on speed. It was formed in the late-night grind of the garage. Kamikaze wasn't just the guy who talked and drove faster, he was the one who worked on Big Chief's 1972 Pontiac Lemons, also known as the Crow. To them, it wasn't just a car, it was the basis of their friendship. They built it themselves, one late-night fix at a time. Kamikaze's own path was set by his hands-on experience. He started with a Chevy LUV with a small block, then a Blazer with a small block, and finally an Agati Chevel. The Chevel was unique. It was a 71 with loud emerald green paint that looked like it belonged on a bass boat. It wasn't pretty, but it had attitude and was fast, tearing up the... While cars come and go, the game never stops. Kamikaze stayed close with a core group of OKC racers who weren't just there to cruise, they were there to dominate. A lot of guys came just to hang out and show off their rides, but for Kamikaze, Big Chief Dave Compto and the rest of their crew, racing wasn't just a hobby, it was a serious matter. That dedication showed in the way Kamikaze drove. If he had to muscle the car down the road to win, that's exactly what he did. He was reckless, smart, and pushed harder than most people. That's where the nickname Kamikaze came from. He had a way of making even the craziest situations look easy. For him, driving was pure instinct. While other people needed a drink to relax or something to take their mind off of things, Kamikaze found his péché at full throttle, just inches from disaster. That's where he thrived, the rush, the edge, the pure adrenaline of knowing he was pushing himself and his car to the absolute limit that was soon. His attitude got him noticed. When he joined Big Chief on Street Outlaws in its 3rd season, he brought that raw, no-holds-barred energy to the screen. The show helped drag racing become popular, and Chris became one of the most talked-about racers in the country. He also became the proud owner of what might be the most famous El Camino in the game. Before Chris got his hands on the El Camino, it belonged to his childhood friend Tyler Flip Pretty. It was a Frankenstein's monster made from parts from their friends' upgraded cars, but that didn't stop it from becoming famous when Flip showed up in the 1st season of Street Outlaws. That car got everyone talking. It was loud, annoying, and completely ridiculous. Those zoomy headers shot nitrous fireballs right out of the fenders, and rumors about how it was put together only made it more famous. People said it was held together with silicone JB Weld. When Flip pulled up to collect his winnings, it made the loss a little more painful. The car might have been a mess, but it was quickly fixed. When Flip died, his longtime friend Justin Big Chief Shearer knew there was only one person who should have the car: Chris. There was no doubt about it. The car had been sitting in a tar pit for over a year, collecting dust, until the right person came along and brought it back to life. When Chris finally turned the key, the engine didn't start. But that kind of car wasn't going to come out of retirement quietly. On the first real drive, one of the rear brakes locked up and caught fire, and that was just the start. Before long, Chris had broken it so badly that it needed to be rebuilt from scratch. That's when he made a deal to put in a friend's already built 582 engine. He wasn't happy about it, because he had always built his own engines, so using someone else's work seemed wrong. As expected, 582 turned into a nightmare, requiring 13 rebuilds in just one season. It was like running a funny car team. Race, rebuild, blow it up, rebuild over and over again. It was enough to break anyone, but that's just part of the game when you're after speed. Chris had had enough of the headaches, and decided it was time to move on. He called Graham Jones at Fast Times Motorworks, and decided to build something serious. An all-aluminum 632 with 4 stages of nitrous. He and his friend Les worked on a back-half chassis conversion right in the garage. His goal was to get back into OKC's top 10 list, and by the summer of 2017 he was back in the mix, winning races and making his presence known. But deep down, something still wasn't right. The car wasn't running the way he really wanted it to, and he never wanted to settle. The drivetrain was a mix of new and used parts put together for one job: going fast. Kamikaze Racing Engines in Arizona built the engine, and Wisco provided the rotating parts. By using parts from fuel injector development and a Haltech EFI system called Falling the Shots, they switched to electronic fuel injection. The same Haltech setup also controlled the El Camino's 6-stage nitrous system. Because why stop at 4? With all that power, traction was always a battle, and if the car wasn't set up right, it was just wasted horsepower. The stock front-end design was holding it back, so AutoFab Race Cars in Maryland built a new chromal tube front end, and Chris and Les did the installation in the garage. And while they were there, they removed the radiator to save weight. Instead of using traditional cooling, the engine now ran on ice water pumped from a tank in the back. The suspension was tuned to perfection, with QA1 adjustable coilovers and pack springs at all 4 corners, making sure a balance of control and aggression. Power went straight through a Powerglide transmission to a Moser 9 in rear end, while the original 4-link setup was kept. But despite the modern upgrades, the car still looked the same. Les did the installation in the garage, and while they were there, they removed the radiator to save weight. Instead of using traditional cooling, the engine now ran on ice water pumped from a tank in the back. The suspension was tuned to perfection, with QA1 adjustable coilovers and pack springs at all 4 corners, making sure a balance of control and aggression. Power went straight through a Powerglide transmission to a Moser 9 in rear end, while the original 4-link setup was kept. But despite the modern upgrades, the car still looked the same. Chris liked that the El Camino still had a G-body soul and was a little unpredictable and wild. Even with all the upgrades, there were some things that just couldn't be changed. For example, the stock wheelbase was 117 inches, and Chris pointed out that the drive shaft alone was 62.5 inches, which wasn't great for a race car. Also, the cab was placed in a way that made it feel like a truck, so shifting everything back to get better weight distribution wasn't an option. It rolled on 29.5x. As long as Chris wasn't on fire, every pass was still an adventure, and that was part of the fun. For Chris, racing isn't just a weekend escape, it's a way of life. Every bolt, every dent, and every late night in the garage tells a story of sacrifice. That car isn't just a machine. It's built from sleepless nights, and every spare dollar he could find, sometimes even the ones he couldn't. During the week, he runs a small heating and air conditioning business. At night, after everyone else has gone to sleep, he's in the garage cleaning the Lexan windows, checking the spark plugs, dialing in the tires, and double-checking the brakes. He doesn't have the money to throw money at problems, so he makes sure nothing is left to chance. Guys like him, who is working class and self-funded and drives a car they built in their garage, aren't supposed to race with the big names, but he does it more than once. The cost of racing has pushed him to the edge, and he's been broke while competing in this underdog tag. Isn't just a show. He'll tell you himself that he's stubborn and proud, which is exactly what it takes to build, race, and win with an El Camino. Of course, he doesn't do it alone. Every great racer has a team, and companies like Haltech Speedmaster and Wolf Aviation Products help him stay in the game. But even though this car isn't rich, it shows what passion, pride, and unwavering determination can do when money isn't an option. If you think this level of racing is out of reach, Chris would tell you that anyone willing to put in the time, money, and heart could build a car like his. But here's the difference. Most people hesitate before getting into something this intense. But Chris never did. For him, it's all or nothing, and it always has been. He spent years trying to fight that part of himself, but now he's given in. There's no middle ground. He'll either make it big or crash and burn trying, which, if you know anything about racing, is, he had the right mindset to win, but he had no idea that the same car that got him so much success was about to ruin his life. You see, street racing has never been the safest or easiest sport. But for people who live for speed, it's still one of the most exciting. Fans of Street Outlaws and its spin-offs know the rush, the raw power of high-performance machines, the tension at the starting line, and the split-second decisions that can mean the difference between victory and disaster. There are some parts of the sport that are always shocking, like how quickly a finely tuned race car can go from peak performance to a twisted wreck. Chris Kamikaze and his legendary 1981 Chevy El Camino learned this the hard way in July 2020 while filming Street Outlaws. It wasn't just a minor scrape or a dented bumper. His El Camino was totaled, including the body, chassis, engine, turbochargers, and almost everything else. Chris later wrote about the event on his YouTube channel, Kamikaze Life. That day, the Elco was already acting up. The driveshaft sensor was giving him trouble. He wasn't feeling like racing, but when another driver challenged him, he just couldn't say no. One race later, his beloved El Camino was nothing but twisted metal. Losing that car wasn't just about money or the many hours he'd spent building it. Elco was his. Seeing his favorite car, the one he had a lot of history with, get smashed was a huge emotional blow. But if there's one thing Kamikaze Chris doesn't do, it's give up. This crash wasn't the end of his racing career. It was just another test, and like any real racer, he was ready to face it head-on for his big comeback. He decided to do something crazy. He put a bunch of wrecked El Camino parts on eBay. These weren't just any parts. They were the Weld Racing wheel Mickey Thompson tire and TBM brake rotor that came off the passenger side when the car flew off the road right in front of Discovery Channel's cameras. And to make things even better, he signed them. The auction went crazy popular with 8 days left. Bids went over 100 and reached an amazing $10,600. But Chris raised the stakes. If the auction reached $25,000, he would cook and serve the winner a steak dinner live on Facebook while wearing his race suit. Fans were thrilled by this bold move, and they eagerly accepted the challenge. Wrecked car parts wouldn't be worth much, but these weren't just any scraps. They were pieces of racing history, and for fans of Street Outlaws, that meant something. Chris got over 100 orders in just 1 week, and the money went right into his next project, Built for Speed. This new car had a familiar look to it, with its aggressive stance and deep gloss black paint. It looked like the El Camino had been reborn. And in many ways it had. Chris salvaged the transmission, engine and drivetrain from the wreckage and carefully rebuilt them. The Elco may have been destroyed by fire, but Chris made sure that its spirit lived on through his business Kamikaze Motorsports, which sells memorabilia and die-cast models of his famous El Camino. As if that wasn't enough, he also has a YouTube channel called Kamikaze Life, where he shares wild road adventures and glimpses into his daily life. The channel has been quickly gaining popularity, with over 70,000 subscribers since it started, kicking off in 2020, but racing is still at the heart of everything Ventures does. That's why fans were surprised when he suddenly disappeared from Street Outlaws, with no big explanation or farewell. Naturally, rumors began to spread. Had he been fired? Had he quit? Was he done with racing? Chris finally broke his silence on Facebook in July 2023, telling fans that he wouldn't be in the 6th season of No Prep Kings. However, he didn't go into detail about why he wouldn't be there, leaving fans with more questions than answers. While he didn't say anything to settle the rumors, his silence only made them stronger, leading to more theories about his departure. But one thing is for sure, Kamikaze Chris has never left the racing world. He still rules the streets of Oklahoma and competes in no-prep events across the country. These days, he's focused on his C5 Corvette, which shows that he has no plans to slow down through every twist and turn. His fans have seen him at his best and worst, but one thing has stayed the same: he never backs down from a task, on or off the screen. His journey is far from over. There is still a long way to go.